Hey folks, this is Kelani. I want to talk to you about Crusader and the build that I've been running with for a little while. Now, this is actually the second rendition of this, because when I went through and tried to do a build guide on the one that I was using, I came across quite a few flaws, which helped me refine things, so we've got, hopefully, a new and improved Crusader build. Now, this current build is quite balanced, I'd like to say. It's got a lot of damage, quite a bit of CC, and quite a bit of longevity in it. It's got quite a bit of healing, I guess is what we're going to call it, instead of toughness, which keeps you alive, basically. So we'll go through it pretty quickly, and I'll mention a few things which still annoy me. So, I'm running with Smite. Now, I actually really don't like Smite, simply because it feels kind of awkward to use. It only hits 4 targets maximum, which is frustrating, and it doesn't hit nearly half as hard as some of the others. The reason I'm using it, essentially, is because it's got a very useful healing rune called Reaping. Now, you gain 1.2k increased life regeneration for 2 seconds for every enemy hit in the chains, and it stacks up to 4 times. Now, that does not mean you need to hit 4 enemies with it. That means if you continually hit stuff, you can keep 4 stacks. Meaning, essentially, you get 5k free life per second, which is pretty nice in keeping you alive. I mean, if you throw a smite backwards while running and kiting, you get a bit more health. It's just really nice. I use that simply because the other smites seem to be really lackluster. They really do. It's ranged, barely, but it's ranged 15 yards, and it seems to work the best. Now, the other one that I do actually like a lot better is Slash, but the problem I have is that it's fire damage, which I don't really care about, except for the Electrify, which is electric or lightning damage. That's actually really nice for the CC and stun, but if you're not interested in it, then obviously there's no point. Zeal is nice because it's holy. I want holy damage, preferably, because that's what I'm stacking in my gear. And it hits harder. And it also hits everything in its animation, so there's no limit. There's no 4 target limit, as with Smite, which is kind of annoying. You can throw in Justice, and you can see the issue that I start to have. It really depends on what you want. Justice is obviously more ranged. Hits not nearly as hard, which is annoying, but you can have some nice runes, such as Justice and Burst for some stuns. It does a little bit of AoE damage, but bear in mind the initial hammer is still only going to hit 1 person, which sucks. So we're running Smite and Reaping. That's just a little bit of an explanation, but I personally feel that primaries are kind of lackluster. We'll get to secondaries in a little bit because I feel they're a bit lackluster as well, but I'm also running Laws of Hope. This gives you a nice shield on activation to allow you to survive hits you may not otherwise survive. I'm running it with Wings of Angels because I despise how slow a Crusader can be, and the movement speed is nice, gets you out of some sticky situations. The passive on Laws of Hope is also relatively nice. Now, on to the damage. I'm running Condemn with Unleashed for instant gratification with huge crits, which is fantastic. It's probably the main source of damage here. For a bit of CC, we add in Shield Glare with our nice Divine Verdict rune to give us 20% extra damage for 4 seconds. Bear in mind that this is going to blind everything in a 30-yard cone in front of you for 4 seconds on a 12-second cooldown, meaning that you have approximately 33% uptime CC. Bring that down with cooldown reduction and you're laughing. That also means that roughly 33% of the time you're doing 20% more damage, which is fantastic. This is a little hiccup, so I'll go on to Bombardment first. Now, I like running Bombardment with Impactful Bombardment simply because it hits so hard, it clears the map, depending on what difficulty and your damage, obviously, but this is the hardest hitting ability we've got. So it's nice. We'll talk a little bit about that in a bit, because the 30 seconds is disgusting and I hate it, but we can shave seconds off that, which is good, which is very nice. Now this is where I would use a Wrath Spender, and I like Heaven's Fury with Fires of Heaven. The only issue that I have is that it costs 40 Wrath, and it's a pain to aim. quite simply. It's really thin. It only hits in that little line, so it's pretty difficult unless you can line things up nicely. Although it does hit like a truck, which is fantastic. 950% weapon damage. For me is about 11 to 12 mil crits, give or take, depending on what we got, obviously. So, I guess I'll talk about alternatives. Heaven's Fury. Bear in mind you have to use Fires of Heaven to turn it into a Wrath Spender. The other one that I like is Blessed Shield. Now Blessed Shield with Shattering Throw specifically, because it throws off the little shards, they bounce around. They do quite a bit of damage. It's probably my favourite spender from the secondaries, but a note on secondaries, they're kind of annoying. Sweep attack is probably the hardest hitting one, but it's frustrating in that it's only 18 yards in front of you and most of the runes are lackluster. You've got trip attack, that's fantastic, 50% chance to be stunned, great. The only issue I have then is that if I'm constantly stunning things, I don't really have anywhere else for my damage except the damage in sweep attack. And if I took that as a spender, I'd have no ranged abilities, which is another reason why I like Blessed Shield and Heaven's Fury. If things are running away from you and you can't catch up, it kind of sucks. So we'll swap that back to Heaven's Fury, because that probably is my favourite. And then we'll have a look at passives. So currently I'm running Heavenly Strength. There is practically no reason why you wouldn't want a two-handed weapon in one hand with a shield. For a Crusader, the damage increase is fantastic. What's interesting is that if you do that, your attack speed is already so low that attack speed actually becomes less valuable to you, especially if you're running big hitting abilities. For example, if Condemn is most of my damage, attack speed isn't going to increase the damage of Condemn. It's going to increase the damage of Smite. Fair enough. Smite. That's it. So what you can stack instead is cooldown reduction, meaning that if you've got a two-handed weapon with huge damage, meaning your Condemn is hitting a lot harder. Bear that in mind, Condemn is on a cooldown, so you need it to hit as hard as possible because you've got those 15 seconds where you're not going to be able to use it. You need to make the most out of every single use. It's not like a primary where you can keep attacking or a spender where you can keep attacking as long as you have your resource. Cooldown directly limits what you're doing with that ability. The harder it hits, the more you get out of the cooldown, which is cool, but obviously that means attack speed is less valuable. So it's an interesting concept which also encourages you to use large cooldowns like Bombardment, because if you're not stacking attack speed because you want to get the Condemn damage, bear in mind this is relying on us using Condemn as well, then the harder hitting cooldown abilities suddenly become more viable and a lot nicer, simply because they're going to hit a lot harder with you using a two-handed weapon, and it's not going to be affected by attack speed, but it is going to be affected by cooldown reduction, which you're already stacking for Condemn. So things start to add up in really weird ways. Now, I'm also using Wrathful for a little bit of healing. Some of the passives can be swapped around quite happily, I'll be honest, but I like Wrathful. If you're using a high Wrath spender, using Wrathful to get 800 life per Wrath spent is pretty damn nice. It's a good chunk of health just by firing off a Heaven's Fury, which is cool. Now, Lord Commander shaves off 20 seconds from Bombardment. It's sad that that's the only thing we really care about in the passive, but hey, beggars can't be choosers. That's a third off the cooldown, which is just amazing. It makes it so much more valuable to take, I'll be honest. And then Vigilant for some passive life regen. I do believe passive life regen is going to take the place of raw life, simply because if you can survive a hit and it takes you down to 50% health, unless you have a way to regen that health, the next shot is going to kill you. Whereas if you get hit and go down to a quarter of your health, if you regen your health before you get the next hit, you're not gonna die, which seems to be more ideal. Let's be honest. Not dying is good. So I prefer passive life regen over anything which would inherently increase toughness. Things like Renewal really annoy me, because they seem really good on paper. 12k life every time I block. Fantastic. First, you need to get hit by a monster. That's kind of bad. Second, you need that hit to be a block. Not guaranteed. Third, you might get healed. don't really like that concept. So, oh, another good one is actually Holy Cause. Whenever you deal holy damage, you heal 1% of your total life. It's nice. It's a lot better if you got holy damage on your weapon, obviously because of the 10%. But, I mean, it depends what you want to roll with. Wrathful will probably heal me a lot more if I can get Heaven's Fury off, but if I can't, then Holy Cause might. So, those are the passives. Now, what about the build specifically? It's actually relatively nice to use. So you got your Smite, which is kind of short range, but deals a reasonable amount of damage. It's not going to be your main damage by any stretch of the imagination, but it gives you that nice life regen. So that's keeping you healthy. Now that's your primary Wrath generator, so if we're at max, we don't really care about that. We want to be using Heaven's Fury, which is a nice long line nuke for 950 weapon damage, which is pretty nice. And then you've got Condemn. You want to use Condemn on cooldown, and if you're running this build with Shield Glare and your 20% extra damage, you want to combine these together. The cooldowns are relatively close to each other, meaning that if you're not in danger, you don't actually need to Shield Glare if you can't Condemn. So we'll Shield Glare and Condemn. It's fantastic, 20% free damage. What you can do on top of that is throw your Bombardment. So, if you've got everything up, you want to Shield Glare into Bombardment. Bear in mind that if they're blind, they're not gonna go very far, or they shouldn't go very far, meaning that your Bombardment is a more guaranteed hit, but I wouldn't say quite guaranteed. So we've got CC, we've got damage. Bear in mind the heavy cooldowns can be a little annoying. You might have to kite around a little bit, specifically for champ packs. And then we've got a nice nuke in the form of our Wrath Spender. Laws of Hope is hopefully going to keep you alive with the regen, the shield, and it's fun to move around kind of fast. So, let's go see what this build can do.
Make your peace, quickly.
So, as you can see, it packs a pretty decent punch, but none of this means anything without looking at my gear. So, whoops, we've got 581k damage currently, so not that high, and we're still getting above 40 mil crits with Bombardment when it's affected by Shield Glare. So, I mean, that's obviously the highest we're gonna see from this build, because Bombardment hits like a truck. And we end up getting somewhere in the range of 14, 15, 16 mil Condemns, again under the effect of Shield Glare, and then Heaven's Fury is about 10 mil when not in Shield Glare, about, again, 13, 14 when it is. So, I mean, it's pretty nice, considering I don't have a great deal of holy damage. I've got 15% on my braces, which obviously help with Condemn. When you're looking to gearing, that's going to be an interesting thing, because you literally have to choose holy or physical. I'd personally go for holy, because it affects more of your damage. Physical would be nice for Bombardment, but putting all your eggs in one basket may be a little too dangerous. But one thing that I did mention was cooldown over attack speed. I'd personally go cooldown over attack speed, but you can still go for attack speed if you're that bothered, I'll be honest, because I don't think it does a great deal for you. It's really strange the way Crusader seems to work. You get a damage increase for using the two-hander in one hand, but that means that your attack speed is so slow that you get a lot more damage out of high cooldowns, which, I don't know, it seems to be the way that I've had the most success. But if you have any other questions or queries which this did not cover, please leave them in the comment section below. Apart from that, remember to leave a like before leaving, and if you want to see more, feel free to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always, I will see you next time.